Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with Nate, and today he's going to walk us through his worship pedal board setup. So let's dive into it.
The first thing I have here is just a Fender HSS that I had to modify with a 7-way switch. Just means that I can split a couple of the pickups the way that I want it to, but I kind of run everything almost the same on the weekends, where it's just kind of on the humbucker. I'm usually using the Herco Dunlop nylon pickups. They're just a little bit easier for me to scratch, and I have it the narrow side up just because I like to get a lot of scratch out of what I play. It just adds a little bit to more of the tonality. It makes it sound grittier, and it's just a tone that I kind of try to shoot for. Another thing that I'm playing with today and I use more frequently is a Dunlop 221. It's a half slide. It just allows me to, you know, still kind of keep my chord shapes. If I need to do a little bit of lead lines, I can still do it while sliding. And I'll be doing a little bit of that today for the worship set where I'm playing it here at Central Baptist. And the next thing that I'm going to probably go into is just my board. I have a pretty simple Fractal setup. I have nothing really looped in the chain. Occasionally I have this expression pedal, which I kind of loop in occasionally depending on where the moment needs it, but I don't really use it as often, so I won't use it today, just kind of as an example. But I stay pretty much similar to what I should say, kind of stick to the same patch almost every week. The reason why I chose Fractal is just because of its simplicity, and I was able to really get something as clean as I could on stage and as small as I could. I'm a very big fan of like the grab and go type stuff. And so for today, for example, I have this patch. I just have it titled Goodness. I think it's because initially I'd built it around Goodness of God, and I just kind of got lazy and never changed the name. So, but I stack everything on with the most important being the amp, and I use a Fender Deluxe Twin is what I'm using to run through. It kind of makes sense since I'm using a Fender Strat, and so it's kind of been I would say the neatest that I could get out of what I'm playing. And then I have a pretty simple chain setup. They're kind of boxes, or they're switches, and it's just delay, drive, chorus, verb, and the occasional trem, flanger, or pitch corrector, pitch shifter, octaver if I decide to throw an additional box based on what we're needing. But these four are kind of what I've always used. Delay, and then again, just balancing between what a dotted eighth and what an eighth note delay would sound. Same thing here, shorter decay or a more wetter decay sounding for the verb, and then adding more to the drive channel, and then again, chorus or a little bit of modulation depth for that drive, or adding a very heavy chorus to achieve much more of a 80s feel, I guess. So what I'm gonna run through first is mainly just the amp. Again, it's a Fender Twin Deluxe. And again, what I'm using is a Dunlop Herco. I believe it's a 75. It's a Flex 75, so it's not as thick as most people like their picks, which is usually like a 1. Mine's a little bit lighter, just because I like them to not break as much. And I hit pretty hard usually. Again, since I don't use a lot of, I would say like volume pedals or compression in my signal, I kind of have everything relying on my right hand the majority of the time. And so just to kind of show you what the signal chain sounds like, again, this is just what the Crunch amp sounds like all by itself. And again, that's just the amp by itself. I'm not really doing a lot. If I wanted to do something a little bit lighter, of course with the effects it sounds a little bit fuller, but I tend to kind of pick as I go, and it'll get cleaner or dirtier as I play. So I rely a lot on my right hand, pretty much. To kind of stack on, just so that you can hear maybe a tiny bit of difference of what I play with the amp, and with just a little bit of the modulated signal, this is what it would sound like. This is without it, And then with a little bit of that chorus, it adds a little bit of a twang to it, but not a lot of people can pick it out because I have the mix set at very low. And again, it's just to add a little bit more of depth and extend that tone based off what I've been able to hear. That's with it on, that's with it off, and that's with it on. And then I'm gonna go ahead and probably throw on my Verb here. This is again gonna be more of a room, it's gonna be a short decay hall, and it's just to add a little bit of some, I would say, extension to that signal if I'm ever playing something that doesn't require something that is too wet, I would say, on the Verb. So you can hear a little bit of that Verb linger on. Okay, and then what I'm going to go ahead and do is also just click on my delay here, and this is my 8th note delay. If you could just hear it based on the BPM that I have it set here. I have it set at 100 just because that's the first song that's going that we're starting on, so it's at 100 BPM, and so I just decided to start the patch off there, and I just tap as I go throughout the set. But this is with the 8th note delay. And then again, how I was talking about earlier, switching between an X and a Y preset allows me to just kind of adjust the effect that I'm using. So in this case, what I did is I switched it over to a dotted 8th if the song is calling for that. So that's how that would sound. Throwing on the more, I would say, wetter Verb or growing that signal out. I think what I'm using is a hall preset for that Verb, and the Verb decay that I had was probably about at 3 seconds, 2 to 3 seconds ish. And then what I did is I switched it to the Y preset, which would have about an 8-second decay, and so you'll see the difference here between that. So you can hear that Verb linger on just a little bit more. The next thing that I'm going to do is the same thing. Again, just switching between the X and the Y preset. The modulation that I choose to use, it's just, I believe it's called a Japan chorus. So it gives me a little bit more of that, I would say, modulation feel to it. So if y'all can hear the difference between that, it was just a little bit more in the mix, and that's pretty much all I'm doing, just bringing that chorus more forward in that mix for my signal. The last thing that I'm going to do is the same thing that I've been doing everywhere here, is just clicking on my drive, and I use this for mostly lead lines or intro lines. It just depends. Again, it's for what the song calls for. Everything that I need to adjust, I roll off my volume knob. So this is going to be probably my most sturdiest signal that I have for the worship set. And it's also the channel that it's also, I would say, the mode with everything on specifically is how I decide to do my lead lines. And so, for example, if I were to play like the lead line on here with this heavier sounding mode, it would be. And so that's pretty much my run through. That's what I use every weekend. And again, I tend not to stray too far away from that. kind of like I went in a little bit earlier, is depending on what the song called for, I added this trem patch just because it requires it a little bit in that song, and that's how the song initially was recorded with. I believe it's a guitar that's just kind of vamping on a 16th note tremolo, so I just threw that in to incorporate it and add a little bit of more relativity to what the artist who wrote the song initially wanted. I don't use a volume pedal. I know that's a little bit different for most guitarists on Sunday, but I kind of control everything from my volume knob, and it's been probably the last 5 years that I've done that. It just allows me to have a little bit more control, gain control specifically over what I want to play. And yeah, but to each their own.
I don't know about the Fractal. Like, are there different drives that you can choose from? And like, do you have certain ones you go to?
Yeah, so really, I mean, there's a couple of like rat distortions that are pretty neat. For worship, you're kind of limited to a lot of the more lighter, more transparent drives. The really simple one that I'm using here is probably what's mimicked of a tube drive, but I like it's just a little bit more my style, and it allows me to throw it on the dirty amp to give it, and it blends it nicely with it. Again, it's just all about finding what pairs well. If I were to play a completely different guitar with this setup, it would probably need something a little bit more different. For this specifically though, I've liked how it's paired up with what would be like a tube screamer drive. That's what it kind of mimics, stacked on top of the already dirty amp. So that's pretty much what I use, and I don't veer from that.
Is there a favorite Verb you have that you go to on there?
You know, there's a lot of different verbs. For the Fractal presets, if you're familiar with it, I use the South Church. It's the title. It's just a little bit more of it's like a blend, I would say, between like a room and a hall. For the majority of, I would say, the songs that we play generally in church nowadays, I use more of a hall verb. Anything to try to mimic the Strymon, probably Big Sky, is what a lot of people shoot for, and so that's what I like. I like that big hall, very warm, rich sounding verb, and this does a pretty good job at it. I have no complaints, and it gets the job done.